matrix is hard, it needs to leave space for them to live in. So a chunk of cartilage would have little gaps called lacunae. Sometimes there's more than one cell in the lacuna together. That happens when the cell has recently divided and they haven't built new matrix around themselves yet. Cartilage is the other type with a poor blood supply. The hard matrix isn't leaving space for blood vessels like it does for cells. So each piece of cartilage will have a surface membrane that has blood vessels in it. Cartilage is used for structure and protection. It's more flexible than bone, but can still hold its shape. Some types are more flexible than others, which we'll look at coming up. And that's determined by the fiber types. Cartilage can also be used for protection. It's hard enough to protect soft things, like part of your ribs are cartilage, and that's still enough to protect your heart, but to let your rib cage be more flexible for breathing. What's weird is cartilage can also protect things that are harder than itself by being soft. We find that on the ends of bones. That's in our first cartilage type, the hyaline, so I'll explain how it works as we go over that one. Before we do, any general questions on cartilage? So, hyaline cartilage has loosely spaced collagen fibers. Often you can't even see them on the slide. There's a little bit of sketchiness here that might be the fibers, but they're not really clear. You just see this kind of smooth matrix with your scattered cells. Hyaline cartilage is found on the ends of bones, any place where two bones will meet. It forms most of your nose. If you feel up near the top of your nose, there's a little section that won't bend, and then after that there's a spot that does. That first part is bone. We'll see that on the skulls starting next week. And then the rest of it's hyaline cartilage. The ends of your ribs against the sternum are cartilage, makes them more flexible. And then your airways have some supporting rings of cartilage. It keeps them open for the air to move through freely. Hyaline provides a lot of structure, nose and airways, some protection like your heart, and the ends of bones. So think about if you have a wooden chair and a wooden floor. They can scrape against each other. But if you put rubber feet on the chair, that prevents the scraping. So the hyaline cartilage is like that rubber that keeps the two bones from scratching each other. Questions on hyaline cartilage? Elastic cartilage is going to have elastic fibers. There's a lot of them, and they go every direction. Because the cells are in lacunae without any ground substance, the fibers are going to divert around them. So here we've got two cells, and in some areas you can see the fibers curving around. Here's an area without cells, and they're just going all over the place. Elastic cartilage is more flexible than hyaline cartilage and less supportive. So it's used in places that need to be able to collapse a little better, like your ears. If you compare the top of your ear to your nose, that's the difference in structure between elastic and hyaline cartilage. The other main place for elastic cartilage is part of your larynx, which is your voice box. You might have heard of something called the epiglottis that folds down to cover your airway when you swallow. The epiglottis is made of elastic cartilage. That helps it hold its shape, but when the muscles pull it down, it bends a little bit to completely cover the airway. So elastic is for structure, but when you need it even more flexible than hyaline is compared to bone. So your structural tissues, you've got bones the hardest, then hyaline cartilage, and then elastic cartilage. And then any other thing that might be used for structure isn't really very hard, like your reticular or dense regular connective tissues. The third one, fibrocartilage, also has collagen, but now there's a lot of it and it runs parallel. The difference that makes to the tissue is that it's compressible. If you were to put weight on it, it could squeeze down to absorb some of the vibrations or shock of movement, like when your heel hits the ground, that sends vibrations up through you. The fibrocartilage can absorb it. And then when you lift the weight, it expands back out. So fibrocartilage forms pads in weight-bearing joints like your knees and between vertebrae. This picture of it looks very similar to the dense regular connective tissue. They are very similar. They both have all these parallel collagen fibers. What's different is because this is cartilage, it has lacunae for the cells. And so the cells are still rounded and easier to see, whereas in the dense regular, they're squished.
Would it be in your arms too, since your arm is a weight-bearing joint?
I don't think there's much now, because you're not, I suspect that animals that still walk on all fours have some fibrocartilage in their elbows. I have to look into that, but we don't. Bone. The matrix is fully solid. So to compare, so we had your nose where you've got the bone part and the cartilage part. Cartilage in food is sometimes called gristle, especially in chicken or turkey. If you've got the whole bird, you might find it. It's stuff that like you just cannot chew it no matter what, but it's kind of flexible. Whereas the bone is just completely solid, it doesn't even bend. There are collagen fibers in the bone matrix. The cells are called osteocytes. So if we had chondrocytes in cartilage, you should remember what cyte means.
Cell?
Cell. So what do you think osteo might mean?
Bone.
Yeah. So osteocytes are bone cells. They have lacunae also. Solid matrix needs to leave room for them. What makes it solid is minerals, especially calcium. Those minerals are there to provide structure, but they're also a storage place. If those minerals are needed for other parts of the body, they can remove them. We'll look at two varieties of bone tissue in the bone chapter. This is what's called compact bone. It's what we looked at last time, or in lab. It has spaces for blood vessels. Cartilage doesn't. And then matrix in rings with osteocytes arranged around that channel. This one's an actual microscope photo. This one's a simplified drawing of it. These little spidery bits, the osteocytes all have these little tentacles that reach out and connect with each other through teeny tiny channels in the matrix. And this is an electron microscope, highly magnified picture of an osteocyte. So this gap is the lacuna. What they've colored yellow is the bone matrix, and all these little strings are where it reaches out to connect to the other cells. Questions on bone structure? So, bone's function in the body is to provide structure. Things like your general body shape is based on where the bones are, and more detailed things like facial features. How wide is your jaw? How sharp are your cheekbones? Eyebrows, things like that. Bone provides protection for essential soft organs like the brain, lungs, and heart. And the matrix stores minerals. If we need, say, calcium for other uses in the body that gets involved in heart and muscle function, then we can remove some bone matrix to get that calcium. We'll look more at how that works in Chapter 7 on bones. Our last connective tissue is blood. Has a liquid matrix with no fibers. 3 types of cells called red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Though technically platelets aren't cells, they're little fragments. They still have a cell membrane, but not really the organelles. Even your red blood cells are missing some organelles like the nucleus and mitochondria. So, blood's function is transport. Nutrients are a big thing it transports, oxygen, glucose, whatever, to all the tissues of your body. Along with that, it also transports heat and wastes. It gets the wastes to the organs that can excrete them. It distributes the heat. Where do we find blood? In vessels, unless one of them is broken. It never leaves unless there's damage. So questions on any of the connective tissues? You want to break now, or you want to finish up the tissues first?
I say finish the tissues.
Okay. Our next category is muscle tissues. What muscle tissues have in common is their cells are long and thin. Because of that shape, stringy, they're sometimes called muscle fibers. But unlike connective tissue, where the fibers are proteins outside of the cells, muscle fibers are the cells. Because of the elongation, the nuclei are oval rather than round. Functionally, muscle tissue has a special property called contraction. We have transitional epithelium and connective tissues with elastic fibers that can stretch, but their relaxed size is the smallest they get, where a muscle tissue can actually pull itself shorter than its relaxing size. And that's how it's able to pull on body parts. There are 3 types of muscle tissue. We classify them by certain characteristics. I need to erase some of our connective flow charts to build a muscle table. got cell shape. So they're all long and thin, but there are additional details that vary. Whether it is striated, that means striped, not to be confused with stratified in epithelial tissues, that means layered. How many nuclei per cell? I bet you thought that cells could only have one, but some muscle tissue can have more than that. Is it voluntary? Meaning, do you make a conscious decision about contracting it? What does it do? And where is it found?